Okay, this is just another learn video. So if you don't want to learn these things, or you feel like you have a strong understanding of painting weights and skinning and this next step, then go ahead and skip it. Go to the next section of videos and where we'll cover the actual skinning of our object. So when we are working with a character like this, we've got to attach it to the joints. As you can see, we've been messing with stuff and rotating joints. They're not moving the model at all. So we have to attach it. And that process is called binding. It happens to be this button here. But I am going to save this scene and open just a new scene and just quickly create a cylinder with several, make the height a little bit bigger, and we'll give it some subdivisions here. Okay. So I'll quickly create just a couple of joints as well. So back under our rigging tab, I'll go here and go to the side and just say, hey, I'm going to have a joint here, here, one here, one here, and one there. Okay. So really quickly, we just have this. We're going to x-ray our joints again so we can kind of see them. This is how they're set up, and we need to attach it. So what we're going to do is we can select our skeleton, and we want to select it from our root joint, and then we're going to select our mesh, and then we're going to bind it. So we're going to go to our skin menu set, and there's this bind skin, and we're going to talk really quick about all the options here. Okay, so this is the default setup. And we're just going to go, there we go. Actually, here we go. This is the default. Okay. So it's going to bind to the joint hierarchy. So whatever joint we have, everything that's in that hierarchy. So that's why we want to select, if we're using this method, we want to select the root. If we select this, it's going to ignore these other two joints, and it's only going to skin to these three joints here. So if we select here, it's going to do the whole joint hierarchy. The other options here are selected joints or object hierarchy. Selected joints are obviously if you just want the selected joints that you want, or by object hierarchy. So generally, I will use the selected joints quite a bit, or the joint hierarchy. I've never used the object hierarchy. So there you go. The bind method, closest distance. Okay, the bind method and the skinning method are classic linear, but there are other options in here as well. A newer one is the geodesic voxel, which is really nice. However, it doesn't play very well if you're working with game engines. So I haven't tested that too recently, but it just didn't like it getting things into like Unity. It really didn't do well. So I generally just stick with the closest distance and go with there. You have a skinning method, classic linear, dual quaternion, or weight blended, where you can actually say, I want part of my model to be classic linear and the other part to be dual quaternion. Dual quaternion is orient based. It can be really nice, but it's limited by 180-degree rotation. So once you rotate past 180 degrees, it will snap. And so that's kind of it. But the nice thing is you will see less pinching with it. But again, we're going to stick with classic linear. It's generally allowed well. And then weight distribution is just done by distance. or neighbors. Distance is just fine. Bind poses, that's just the pose your model is in when you initially bind it. So you could have multiple ones. You don't need to worry about that too much. And then max influences. How that means for every vert on here, how many joints can influence this joint. So right now it's 5. A lot of times if you're working with game engines, they're going to want that lower, like 4 or 3 even. And a lot of times in game engines, they will just, you may bind it with 5 and they may restrict it to 3, and it will just do the 3 most prevalent influences and wipe out anything else. So we'll keep it at 5 for right now. And everything else is pretty standard. You're not going to get too much into anything there. Colorizing the skeleton just means it's going to give it a different hue and color for each joint, which just, it's kind of nice, but it's not a big deal. And then remove unused influences. So if there's a joint that's not being used for any weight anywhere, it will just remove any of that influence there. So yeah. So that is what we will do. So just to kind of show you, this is, so we'll just click apply with that. So now you'll notice they're all colorized, and we can actually go in and rotate, and it's going to affect the model. So you'll notice here that as it's rotating, it's pinching on this. Okay, this is normal. It's calculating the position of this by all the joints that are there, by their position, not so much by rotation, which is why you'll see a lot of pinching, and then you'll need to use, corrective blend shapes or add extra joints in there to get it looking nice. Now, if I undo all that, I'll just show you the difference here. The other thing is, I've already undone that. Let me just reapply that. You'll notice that it will pinch as I'm rotating. So it kind of just squeezes everything all together there. If I were to use the dual quaternion, you'll kind of see the difference here, and we'll click apply. So now we're doing that. Now it's rotating it based on the rotation and not on like position. So we're not getting a pinch. But watch what happens here as I approach and pass the 180 mark. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. And then here I'm at 180 and I go again, and it's going to pop. Okay. It doesn't like anything past that. I'm going to turn off my discrete rotate so you can see it a little better as it approaches. So it just pops back. It doesn't like, so it won't continue to pinch and twist. It will only go a certain amount before it snaps and heads back. So it's something to be aware of if you use that. And then, but it does give you really nice deformation. So here it maintains the volume a whole lot better. And it looks so much better than the other, but it has its limitations, right? It will do some snapping once it gets past the 180 mark. And then it's generally not really accepted inside of engines, which is why we don't use it. Okay, the other thing go back to classic linear, you could use is geodesic voxel. This is really nice. What it basically says is, let's say you had an object like this. This was all one object. We'll pretend that it's all stitched together, and you had joints coming down here and joints coming down here, right? We'll do the same thing. Control D, rotate it. So we'll say we had something like this, okay? What the geodesic voxel will do is it will take your mesh and just pretend you were filling it up with sand inside the interior of your mesh, okay? And wherever a joint is, it radiates like this heat that would go all the way out to the edge of the mesh, and that would be it. And it would just say, oh, look, it's touching all of this. So that's the influence that I'm going to give this joint just inside of here. It's actually really, really nice. If you use the closest distance, what's going to happen is when you bind this as one object, this joint will actually start getting some influence on this over here, even though it's not really a part of it. You and I will look at it and be like, yeah, this joint shouldn't have influence on these vertices. Okay, but the distance says, well, it should have some just because it's that close to it. It's close enough that it should have influence. So that's kind of the difference. The geodesic voxel does, like I said, it kind of takes into account the interior and how that volume is filled, and that's how the joints will have influence on it. So it makes it for a lot cleaner and you'll get a lot better result right from the start, and you won't have to do a whole lot of editing. But we're not going to use it simply because I want this to be just kind of the basics. It is the foundations, so you can build on this and find other areas. If you were creating something for a short film, you can use any of these, and it's great. Just these things don't always play well inside of engines, so we just leave it at kind of the standard. Maybe we would change the max influences to 4, but that would be about it. So we will again just select this, click apply, and now we're bound again to the object. Now, your initial bind isn't going to give you the influence that you want, so we're going to go into the weight painting tool. Okay, so this is the button for it, but you can find it under skin and paint skin weights, and this is a fairly tedious part. Okay, so what we're going to do is, the way that we're going to paint weights is we're going to go general to specific, so large to small, and we're going to focus on symmetrical to asymmetrical. So and then we're going to go from large items to small items, and we're going to focus on one side of the body because we're going to mirror our skin weights to the other side. So in order to use the tool, you would click on the object that you want to paint weights on, and you go to skin and paint skin weights. And if you go to your tool settings over here, or this button up here, if you don't see the tab, and it will list out all the joints that are influencing it, and if you click on it, it will show you. It will probably show up, could just be black and white. There are these color options that will show things. So you can kind of say like, oh, look, anything that is yellow is 50%, anything that's red is 100%, blue is 0, and then all the way black and all the way white are going to be total on or off influence, right? I like to use this color setup, but whatever you're comfortable with is totally fine. So this is the color ramp. This is just how it's displaying as opposed to the grayscale. Grayscale, you can kind of start losing like, hey, I can't tell if this is gray. I can't tell if this is, um, if it's black or if it's 100% white. The colors just help you to see those differences a lot more easily. So you're going to have options under here. So we're in paint mode and we're in add mode. So right now we have a 100% opacity. So it's going to paint whatever value that we have set. And this is the value. Right now it's really small. And generally we want it to be pretty small. Unless we're 100% sure we want 100% value on whatever we're painting. Okay, you can't, if you use 0, nothing's going to change because we're in additive mode. It's not adding anything. And then you have a min and max value of 0, 1, and you have a flood option, which will flood everything on the whole model with the value that you have set. Okay, it will add that to it. So in order to use it, you can see your paintbrush and there's a little circle. If you hold down your B, as in boy, button, and you left click and drag, it will expand the size. We're going to use that a lot. Okay. And then if I add 0.1 to this joint, the first blue one highlighted shows me adding it. And then if I hold down my shift key, it will go, you'll notice the A changes to an SM. It's going to smooth it. Okay, so there's a lot of adding and smoothing when we're painting weights. It's like, okay, I've got this. Now I want to smooth these verts here. So I just click smooth to get a nice smooth transition, right? Control Z still undoes everything. Not a big deal. The other one that is used fairly often is the replace. Instead of adding a value, it will replace whatever value is here with the value that you have here. This is really nice if you want to paint away weight. Like, I don't want this joint affecting up here at all. So with the value set to 0, I can paint that away. Some things to be aware of when you're painting things away is Maya is going to put it wherever it thinks it should. So if you're painting something away 0 and no other joint has influence on it, it will just throw it on random joints. Whatever Maya feels like it should put the weight on, it will do that. So in your model, every vert has to have 100% of influence on something. So usually it's a mix between multiple joints, and that's what gives us a smooth bind, is what this is called, because we can balance portions of that 0 to 1 ratio between multiple joints. In this case, up to 5 joints. So if you have something, we'll go to add. We're going to add 100% right here. Okay, it's all white. It's got 100%. Maybe I'll do it on here too. Okay, and this is all on joint 3. Okay, now if I go in, I'm like, actually, I don't want that. I'm going to replace my value with 0. I'm going to push it here. We don't know where that value is going to go. Okay, so you should always be kind of aware. So whenever you have something, you're like, I want to paint away 100% from the 100% influence, you need to be aware of where it's going. So a lot of times it's better to actually go to a different joint and add a little bit of value from that, just so Maya knows where to push that weight to. So here it did okay, but in more complex objects, it's going to do some crazy stuff. So right here, we painted 0 and it added it on joint 4 and joint 5. We have value on both of that, which we don't want. So we're just going to go value 0, and we're going to paint that out to get rid of that. Okay, and then we're going to focus on just one side of our object, the pos or the negative x side or left side. So we can go here, we can say, hey, I want all of this. I need some value added on this right here, and then I want to mirror that so that I get that other side as well. So we can go up here and go to our skin and go to mirror skin weights, and it's going to automatically add that. So it's great. We only have to do half the work to get the whole thing done. And that's what we're going to look for. This is also why we're going to be focusing on symmetrical geometry before we focus on asymmetrical geometry. So our character, Patrick, has a pocket and a watch on one side that there is no geometry on the other side to match with. So we're not going to worry about that stuff until we're done with all the symmetrical stuff, because we're going to have to do that, and we won't. Once we start messing with our asymmetrical stuff, we're not going to be able to use our mirror skin weights tool, because it's going to transfer it really weird, because it's not a 1-for-1 for the vert count on either side. So it won't know, it'll do some weird screwy stuff. So we're going to stick with the areas that we know are symmetrical, and once we're happy with all of that, then we're going to go and we'll mess with the asymmetrical stuff as kind of a polish pass. So those are the few things to be aware of. We're going to use add, we're going to use replace, and then whatever you have selected, if you hold shift, it will always be a smooth function that you can go on. So you're going to be holding shift off and on a lot as you're wanting to add influence and then smooth it out and up. So you can see I get a smoother transition, smooth it out between all the other verts, or add a little bit more, smooth it some more, smooth maybe the edges, and add and smooth. So a whole lot of that is going to be happening. Those are the main tools that we're going to be using, and then we're going to be skipping around through all of our joints to get things all set up. The other tool that we'll be using is our component editor. So if you select your object and you go to Windows, Animation Editors, actually, I think it's a relationship editor. Let's see. Well, here it is. It's under General Editors, and it's called the Component Editor. When you're painting weights, we'll go back to our tool, and we have our smooth skin. If we select our verts, so right now nothing's showing up here, but if we select some verts on our object, it's going to give us all like the very technical information that all adds up to 1 for how our object is influenced. This is a great way to be like, hey, look, I want to quickly get rid of some influence. So this joint 1, joint 2, maybe joint 3 has some influence on this, but I doubt joint 5, 4, and 5 and 4 will, but it has a little bit of influence here. So if we select the top and then hit Control and select that off, because we don't want to change that, we can change the whole column really quickly. So we just then type in 0 on our number key and enter, and it's going to zero it out, and now that joint 5 disappears. We can do the same thing with joint 4. Click 0 and enter, and it will push it. It's just pushing it to all the other joints evenly. Okay, so that is where we're going to be, and these are the tools that we're going to be using. So we will get more into them in our next lessons. But these are a majority of the tools that we're going to be using, what they look like and how they function and what settings we're going to be using. So hopefully that gives you a good foundation for our next section.